Good afternoon and welcome to the Committee on Education. Thank you all members and community members and LB staff who are here today. Um, I want to just be upfront. I was not able to publish my agenda in advance, and so I won't be able to hold an official meeting where we make decisions today, but we are going to be hearing an amazing presentation about the Maritime Academy that is developing here in the Marianas as a career pathway for our people, both young and old. And so that will be the main topic of today's meeting. And so thank you all for joining us online and here in the gallery. I will take some time to introduce everyone before we begin. So to begin, we have our members of the Committee on Education present with us is Representative Denita Yang Temai on my right. She is the only one from education in the committee here today. Thank you for making it, Ms. Chairwoman. And also on my left, we have the Speaker of the House, Representative Edmund Villagomez. Thank you, Speaker, for joining us. I know this topic is of interest to you, so thank you for being here. The other members are not present. I'm not really sure where they are, but we don't have a quorum anyway for the official meeting, so it's okay. But the presentation is the main focus, so we're good for that. On the front here, we have Cameron Nicholas. He is helping us with the presentation slides. To my left, we have Delbert and Jonathan, who are our ITs here in the LB. And I know we have a sergeant at arms in the room. I believe it's Will, and he is somewhere out there. All right. So I would like to invite our guests this afternoon to the podium up front here, or the seat. Go ahead and come on up. And this is Captain Michael Bucker. You can sit right there at that first middle seat. You get the floor there, right there. Will he be able to be heard? We have another microphone if you'd like to hold it, because the people online won't be able to hear you if you're not speaking in a microphone. Okay, so you can stand there. We'll give you the handheld mic, and as long as you're comfortable with that. Okay, cool. Thank you, John. Not yet, not yet. He's turning it on.
Test 1, 2.
There we go.
Great.
And go ahead and introduce yourself and anything else, and we'll listen. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, legislators and staff that are here. I'd like to first introduce myself and Captain Dave, who we both are the founders of Western Pacific Maritime Academy. And then I'd like to go into a little short story about how we came to be. And then finally, I'll just step through the presentation, and at the end, there'll be plenty of time for some Q&A. Okay, so first myself and Captain Dave, both of us are professional mariners in the professional sense, in that we have had a career at sea, and both of us have our unlimited captain's license, and both of us at some point in the last, let's say, 10 or so years, or a little bit more, a little bit less in my case, came to Saipan on the ships out at anchor. And for myself, I came here in 2014, continued working as captain until about 2017, after which I was recalled into the Navy for 2 years at 5th Fleet, and then subsequently retired. And Captain Dave, something similar came to the island, homesteaded here. Both of us decided to stay because, well, we just love Saipan and everything it has to offer. And in an odd sort of way, Captain Dave and myself, we have very, very similar backgrounds, almost identical career paths. We're about the same age. And in fact, we have, coincidentally, we grew up, so to speak, about 5 minutes from each other in Annapolis, Maryland. So a lot of coincidences there. Okay, so Western Pacific Maritime Academy. About 2 years ago, I was working with another maritime school stateside on bringing maritime training here to Saipan. And for a number of reasons, it did not work out. And then Dave and I uh, sat down and concocted this new plan about doing starting a maritime academy from scratch. And a couple of the first people that we spoke to, uh, Representative Staffler, yourself, and Senator De Leon Guerrera, who I would call to this day are the initial cheerleaders of the Maritime Academy. And then with that encouragement, we just put forth a very meticulous plan on how to get from nothing, from zero to hero. And we followed that plan. And a couple of those points were some no-go decision-making positions, like getting courses or getting instructors and that sort of thing. And so here we are. So that's the short story about how Western Pacific Maritime Academy came to be. And I can say that at this point, we're more than just a concept. At this point, we are actually a thing. And we're going to talk about that in one of the slides. So we are a thing. We don't have courses, we don't have classes yet, but we are a thing. We have everything in line, including U.S. Coast Guard approved courses that we can teach. We just have not executed on those yet because we're still working some issues out. Okay, so I want to first acknowledge all of our partners, each of whom is very, very important in this first slide. As an example, no Maritime Academy ever didn't exist without some kind of a regimented program. So while establishing the Maritime Academy, we also established the local chapter of the Naval Sea Cadets called Natibu Division. And that's headed up by Ray Alvarez and Reno Silas as commanding officer and executive officer. So my job with them is, support. And Captain Dave is also an adult leader with that. You'll see the Cultural Village, CCVI. You'll see Tassi to Table. You'll see the Saipan Boating Association, the Fishermen's Association. All those partnerships are really, really important because we have to have a way to give our midshipmen students sea time. And so in partnership with those associations, we have access to, probably as many as, 50 vessels that we can put these kids on, you could say, as an apprenticeship program or call it whatever you want. But that's how they document their sea time. We have the great support of the public school system through Dr. Taylor and through Commissioner Ada. And they're hungry for us to provide to them the vocational track new course curriculum, which we're going to shoot up on Thursday, and NM Tech, which is where we're currently housed right now. The college, who's really hungry to pull our program into their curriculum. I think they have a nautical sciences or some kind of curriculum like that. Windjammers International, which is my company, it's a consulting company that has funded all of the time and the resources to get us as far as we are. My Tags, which is one of the premier maritime schools in the States, whose courses we've licensed, and so on. So kudos and many thanks. We couldn't be where we are today without these key partnerships. Next slide. Okay, so what is our vision? Our vision is to become the center of maritime training excellence in the whole Western Pacific. So what does this mean? In the same way that AARF down at the airport provides all of the training for firefighting, aviation firefighting across the whole Western Pacific, from Palau all the way to Kwajalein and Majuro, we'd like to be able to do that also here. So that's a very lofty vision, but I think it's very achievable. And we're, I would say, 80% there, 75% there. What we don't have is we don't have permanent facilities. We don't have a training vessel. We don't have a lot of the really sexy things that a maritime school actually needs to to go from a great academic institution to a full-service maritime academic institution. The kids, young people, the mariners that are here on Saipan, if they want to get training, they have to fly to San Diego or somewhere on the West Coast or somewhere stateside to pay for training. And training, maritime training in general, is not inexpensive. But when you start adding on, $4,000 worth of flights and the cost of per diem and hotels and stuff like that, what we're going to end up having is a situation where there's a critical mass of demand for professional mariners, even at the what they call the six-pack level, but even for the companies like Cabris that have no other option than to, at great expense, send their people to the States to have do training for continuity and upgrade purposes. This right here is a graphic of EchoDoc, which is what our dream is, and hopefully a partnership with the government will help us realize that. We're already working with CPA, and there's more to that story on future slides. Next slide, please. Okay, so this right here, I would say, is one of the most important slides that I can tell you about the investment of training in general for yourself, but more so maritime training. Just a personal story. When I was getting out of the Navy the first time, after about 10 years of enlisted service, I went to New York Maritime Academy for 2 years to round out my undergraduate education. In those days, those 2 years were about $15,000 or something like that, $7,000 a year or so. That was in the early 90s. I shipped out for 4 months as a third mate because I already had my license. That was just how I did it. And I was able to pay for, in 4 months, my college tuition for 2 years, living expenses in New York, which I guarantee you is a little bit more than here in Saipan, for 2 years. And that was all on the backs of 4 months worth of work, right? An entry-level mariner, well, let's talk about the cost of training. So a 4-year vocational track through PSS will output a mariner who is fully qualified to be an entry-level seaman, meaning an ordinary seaman, a wiper, or a steward utility, on these big ships out here in Saipan or anywhere in the merchant marine, with an earning capacity of $7,000 a month. And the investment for that is between, let's say, about $10,000 and $15,000 for a 4-year program at PSS, okay? So if you do the ROI, for those of you who are accountants or have a financial background, most companies will say they are happy with a return of 10%, right? The return on this investment in the first year, meaning 6 months worth of work, is 400%. 400%. Not 10%, but 400%. So one thing that I remember learning in economics way back, when I was a young kid, was that when people invest or governments invest in the education of a person, that investment is the most important investment because that investment produces a lifetime of return. Next slide. Okay, so Western Pacific Maritime Academy, you could say, has expanded its role, vision with 5 programs. The first is a PSS vocational track, and I just want to speak a little bit to that, and there's other slides that will amplify this. The story here is that when we approached MyTags as the training provider, they said, oh, well, that's a great idea. We've done this before. And our thinking at that point was initially just to do training to the commercial mariners, meaning out to the public. And they said, well, we've done this before with other schools in high school programs. And then all of a sudden, the light bulb went off. The reason is because if you just teach to the existing uh, maritime community, the seafarers that are here in Saipan, you will get a lump of people that come through, and then they have their merchant marine credential and they have their training, and then that's it until the next generation. You could say 5 years down the road, there's a new demand for a bunch of people who need that training, right? So doing something through the college and through the high school makes the investment worthwhile from the academy's point of view, because you have a recurring feed of, let's say, customers, right, to keep the whole thing going, right? There was another school, maritime school here on island for, I don't know, Dave, was it about 10 or 15 years or so? Okay. And eventually it dissolved and failed simply for the reasons that I'm telling you. There's just not enough demand for a maritime school that focuses solely on the seafaring public. That was MTI, Marine Training International, right? Yeah. So he supplemented some of his training by convincing NCL, what NCL stands for, Norwegian Cruise Lines out of Hawaii, to send their people out here. And so there was anyway, they're gone. So there's a void in the maritime training, arena. The second program is developing a program very similar to the 4-year vocational track program for Northern Marianas College. The last time that I had any serious discussion with them was about a year and a half ago when I was first talking to Representative Staffler. I know her as Layla, so pulling that out is a little bit difficult sometimes. And they were very motivated. And the second touch point was in a discussion with some students down in Rhoda earlier this year, and NMC was part of that conference. And so there was a renewed interest. Now, we haven't pushed and followed up on that simply because there's only one and two of us, and so we just have to prioritize. The third is courses through to CNMI Seafarers, which will be, you could say, a benefit. So once we have all the courses, then we can offer them to the seafarers, and we have done that in such a way that we would not do that directly through ourselves, but through NM Tech and 500 Sails Cultural Maritime Training Center. Saipan Sailing School is a program that was developed by Captain Dave directly, and we have now absorbed that into Western Pacific Maritime Academy, simply because all of the work for, that you have to do for business license and tax exempt status and all that has already been done. And then a boating safety program, which is free to the public, and in cooperation with Coast Guard and also with DPS, where we will be able to train or provide courses or training to the public and vessel inspections that meet both American Yachting Council standards and Coast Guard standards depending on the vessel itself. And of course, the people aspect of boating safety as well. Next slide.
If I may, while you go to the next slide, I just want to recognize Representative Tina Sablon and Representative Richard Lazama, who have joined us here today. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is a curriculum at a glance of what the 4-year vocational track curriculum does. It starts out, and some people might say oddly enough, but it does start out with giving the freshman student or the first-year student, if they come in as a junior or whatever year they come in as, a merchant marine credential. This is like a passport, and this is the first step of being able to work professionally on the water. The only thing that we have to make sure that the students or the young people do when they have that is that if they're working for pay, that they have to comply with whatever laws would perhaps restrict them from earning money for pay under 16. I'm sure there's something like that here in Saipan as there is in the States. But they have that. And that is a a huge point of pride and professionalism, um, just having that merchant marine credential. Now, the second part, the second course here is the VPDSD, which is a security course. It's kind of an easy thing, and then we go into in future courses to the more advanced courses. We have here basic training, a course called RFPNW, which has to do with being a lookout and steering, and then in the third year, survival craft, and then some advanced courses. And I've got these advanced courses as highlighted as blue because you could call that college track courses if you would, and that would prime somebody to get into higher licenses. Um, and then in the final year, the Able Seaman course as a required course. At the end of that, provided that they've gotten their sea time, which there would be plenty of opportunity for the kids to work on through the partnerships that we've already created for them to get onto boats to document sea time. Okay. After they graduate, they can then go to the OUPV, which is the operator of uninspected passenger vessel, or the 100-ton, depending on the sea time requirements that they've already accumulated over the previous 4 years. I want to point out that one of the things that the Maritime Academy is very, very interested in, we don't profess to be of the Chamorro or Carolinian culture, but is to get the young people back in touch, or in touch if they're not already in touch, with their maritime cultural heritage. So here's what we recognize. We recognize that the CNMI, the people of the CNMI, the people of all of the Southwestern Pacific or the Western Pacific Islands are naturally seafaring people in their, let's say, 60 or 70,000 year history. That is just the way it is. And so we have worked very, very hard to develop a framework for a curriculum that there's a touch point in each year for these kids to sit in front of the master navigators, go down to the cultural village, learn about their maritime heritage. That's a very important part at the high school level, anyway, of the 4-year curriculum. It's important to me, and it's important to the master navigators. It's important to the organizations that take care of those cultural things, mostly under the House of CCVI. Okay, next slide. This right here shows a breakdown of the time and cost of the courses in all 4 years. Rather than speaking to it, you've got the presentations. You can study those on your own, but you can see here where the it is a substantial vocational program. It is. There's no question about it. None of these courses are super difficult, except for when you get to the Navigation 1 and Navigation 2 courses, and year 3 should be reading Navigation 1. I'll make sure that I correct that. So depending on whether or not they take those courses, then we can say that the cost of the curriculum in 4 years is somewhere between $11,000 and $16,000, roughly speaking, right? How quickly are they going to earn that back if they get their AB certificate and go out and sail as an ordinary seaman? They'll get that back. I mean, they won't invest it back into us, but the cost of that investment they'll get back in 2 months, roughly speaking. That's $7,000 a month. Okay, next slide. What are the key benefits? In order to get a merchant marine credential and keep it, you have to be drug-free. So this is a very important piece, right? Captain Dave and I, even though we're not sailing, we go down, we march down to the drug testing place every 6 months, and so we are always under a drug-free certificate, right? You have to have that. Employers are required to have a random drug testing program, and the school, the academy, will, for its students, also have a drug-free drug testing program, random drug testing program. Self-sustaining, well-paying jobs. I would say that the three pillars that would define the success at least here on the CNMI, of any vocational track are one: education, youth, self-sustainability, right? If you can get a kid working on high school after high school enough to support a family, which certainly this career track will easily do, as opposed to anything else that might pay substantially less, then that is a success. Culture of responsibility, very important, because the minute you take on the duties of being on board your own vessel, be it a sailboat, a canoe, a kayak is what I mean, or working as a crew and the helmsman of somebody's fishing boat, or being with your father or mother, your uncle, as the helmsman on the fishing boat, you're taking on what we call command responsibility. That's a big deal. That means essentially that as a 14-year-old, somebody will be responsible for somebody else's life. Summer apprenticeship and intern programs, as I already discussed in the beginning, this is going to be through the partnerships that we have with the various boating associations on board. Pride in the CNMI maritime cultural heritage, a big priority for us through existing organizations. Regimented program through the Sea Cadets, we'll talk about that a little bit more. And we believe that this will be very, very quickly, once it's proven in Cagman this coming year, that we can expand it to the rest of the islands on the CNMI. But not only that, we can expand it to Guam and other places as well in time. Next slide. Okay, so this right here is actually a very important slide, because in one slide, in one picture, it shows the full range of potential that somebody with a maritime background coming out of high school where they can go. So if you look at this graphic, it's in 4 quadrants. Everything to the left, you could say, is military. Everything to the let's see here. Everything to the left is unlicensed or enlisted. Everything to the right is licensed or officer, right? Everything to the bottom is military, and everything to the top is commercial. If somebody is if a student is on a college track, right, then the natural output for them, if they're interested in the Maritimes, is to continue their education in a maritime school, right? Maritime schools in the States are not expensive as compared to many schools, right? There's 6 of them in the States, and I would say that in general they're fairly easy to get into, because they have a lot of open slots. In other words, there's more seats than there is students that are applying in the aggregate. That's been the case for a long time. Why? Because the U.S. Merchant Marine in general is a diminishing, for many, many years, has been a diminishing sector of trade. For the first time in, I would say, to my knowledge, forever, we're going to actively be able to give kids an alternative to the Army, which is JROTC, right? So now we can say there's Coast Guard, there's NOAA, there's Navy, there's these other opportunities. But not only that, guess what? There's maritime schools, and there's ROTC units at 180 different colleges around the country that they can end up, let's say, for example, getting a commission in the Navy, right? So very, very powerful slide. You may have questions on it. I don't want to speak to it too much more, but it shows the full range of opportunities available to a graduating student, be it getting on a commercial ship or enlisting into the Army, or into the Navy or Coast Guard, or working toward higher education and a commission in the services. Next slide. Okay, so this is just a retread of what we just talked about in the previous slide. It just gives it in a what's the word here? In a narrative rather than a picture. So I won't belabor this particular slide anymore. Next slide. Okay. So representative staffs are said, oh, when I first came, it seems like you've made a little bit more progress since the last time we met, which was what, 2 months ago, 3 months ago? So significant progress. Uh, these are all of the things that we have steadfastly worked on since a year and a half or a little bit more than year and a half ago to get us to where we are today, right? So all of the check marks, all of the goals that we have set, we have met, and we are here now with courses, with our tax exempt status, with a curriculum that's going to be forwarded to PSS presently, with Coast Guard approved courses, with the I don't want to say the promise, but with uh, the word is ARPA funding that has been granted to us, but we haven't received the money, whatever that word is. So with some funds, um, with the business license, with everything, with all the right partnerships and so on. So we are good to go. When I said in the beginning, we're more than just a concept, we're a thing. This is what I'm talking about right here. We are a thing. The Maritime Academy is up and running. And I thank you, cheerleaders. So, okay. Next slide. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the Sea Cadets. I've got just 3 slides to talk about the Sea Cadets. Sea Cadets, I said in the beginning, no maritime academy ever in the history of ever did not have some kind of a regimented program. Why? Discipline is very important on a ship. It doesn't mean that a ship is a military prison or something like that. If you ask my son right now, who's on a roll-on, roll-off ship going between Japan and Australia, and he texts me, every couple of weeks when he's 100 miles to the east of Saipan, he goes, "Oh yeah, this place like a jail." Um, so, but the point is that on a ship, unlike in, let's say, an accounting office, right, where you can uh, turn your heels and walk away. On a ship, the captain is the captain is the captain, and if you don't have the kind of discipline that um, instills instinctively order in the crew of a vessel, you're going to have things like mutiny on the Bounty and other stories that we've heard about. You're going to put people's lives in danger. So being able to trust your captain and step in line with what his priorities are for keeping his ship, his crew, and his cargo safe are extremely important. More so in the military, as far as discipline and following regimented protocol and so forth is concerned. So when my wife and I came back to Saipan after being on the mainland for most of last year, one of the first things I set out to do was to reconnect with Ray Alvarez and Reno Silas to put together this beast called the Sea Cadets. Very quickly, we organized. We had a bunch of adult leaders that came together and said, "Okay, we want to do this." And today, we have 27 fully registered Sea Cadets here on Saipan in the Natibu Division. Headquarters of Sea Cadets has said to me directly and to Commanding Officer Ray and Executive Officer Reno that they have never seen this before. This is nothing short of a miracle. We are, in addition to that, we have a recruit training, call it a boot camp, that is happening in about 3.5 weeks for these kids. They're sending somebody out from the mainland because none of us adult leaders are qualified yet to be what's called a COTC, to run our own programs, because there's some you have to be in the program for a spell, and we're so new that we don't have that yet. But one of the most exciting things is that we have developed, meaning the Sea Cadets, and are putting on a advanced training called Micronesian Maritime Cultural Heritage, which is for the first time ever drawing kids from the mainland, from Guam, and the kids that qualify here on Saipan into that program. It's a 7-day program that is focused entirely under the House of CCVI, and it's going to be dealing with dance, maritime history, the local culture. And I'm not the expert here, right? I rely on these guys down there at the HUD, and having stories directly with the master navigators every single day in the evening time. We're very, very excited about this, and I think I think one of the most important things is it's a way for the local maritime heritage to be showcased to kids from the mainland, and of course, our own people here, face to face, in a way that just hadn't happened before that we're aware of. So very important. Okay, so we were established on the 24th of January as an unincorporated organization, drawing from the tax-exempt status of the headquarters organization, which is really quite big. Sea Cadets is funded by Congress and by the Navy and Coast Guard, and the output is, developing leaders of character. The values are courage, self-sustainability, or self-reliance, and patriotism, and so on. Very similar to JRTC. The focus is the Maritimes. Next slide. There are about 400 units throughout the country, and Saipan is the newest, latest, and most successful unit. Natibu Division. Okay, next slide. So here's just a small slide. It talks about Sea Cadets comes in much like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. You've got the sort of the middle school level. Those are called the Navy League Cadets. The high school level is Navy Sea Cadets. And so we have of the 27, I think there's 19 Sea Cadets and 8 Navy League Cadets. That's the breakdown. Next slide. And if we could just get that video to roll, maybe.
Your left, your left, your left, right, left, left, right. Right. So we marched last Saturday from the base of Mount Tapachau at that parking lot all the way to the top, spent an hour up there doing knot tying and different things, and then marched back down. So other things that we're working on, and mind you, if you've ever seen a proper march, I mean, our kids are not quite up to standards, but there's a lot of enthusiasm. About half of them showed up because this was actually an optional drill and not a required drill. Required drills happen just once a week for 6 hours on a Saturday. Other things that we're doing is we're taking the kids out sailing. We're doing Navy swim tests and training. And then there's, that means something exactly. And then, a lot of seamanship and so on. So it's a really awesome thing, and they're getting a head start with their Maritime Academy training for those of whom are actually also in the Maritime Academy. So one of the requirements of the Maritime Academy is that every cadet that joins the Maritime Academy in the PSS program must become a Sea Cadet, because that regimented backbone is really important to the Academy. Kids can come into the Sea Cadets; they don't have to be part of the Maritime training program, but we would love for them to if they were interested in. Just one word about the PSS program. We are running, provided that the curriculum is approved by PSS, which we have no doubt that it will be. We're running the pilot program in Cagman only, and we do have people who are in the private schools and in Marianas High School and other places that are interested in the program, but we're just going to limit it to that. That doesn't mean that they won't be able to come in. It just means that
if they do, when they do come in, or if they want to come in, if they're motivated enough to come in, they're going to have to join us at the Cagman facility for wherever the training, where the training is going to be occurring. Next slide. Oops, next slide. All right. So in one of our longer range visions, we would like to establish ourselves, because having a maritime school actually requires some additional things, like, for example, lifeboat trainers, a firefighting trainer, and so on. It happens to be that all of the options that we have looked at, Echo Dock, Delta Dock, combination of Delta Dock and ARFF, um, are all CPA properties. Now, it just happens to be that and I've been attending the CPA board meetings, for the last 3 months, every single month, that as of last month, CPA board voted to reject the existing RFQ that they had with Pacific Rim, or the organization under Pacific Rim that wanted to develop that. The details of why that was rejected, I'm not really clear, but that's the way it was, which means that Echo Dock is free and open. This is going to be one of my asks of the legislature, is to help us with securing that, either through a letter or some other means. And I'm not a politician. I'm just an ordinary seaman, you could say. So I don't know how these things work. And I know even less about how they work here on the CNMI. But I can tell you this, is that the president of the board, Kimberly Hines, I had to pull that out of my brain here for a sec, is interested, and all of the board members are interested in the Maritime Academy and doing something with the Maritime Academy. Will the Maritime Academy be able to give them their return on investment that they would like? No, because we're nonprofit, right? And especially in the beginning years, we won't be able to. But what can we do? Well, we can bring, through MARAD, $30 million of investment through the IIJP, which is the Port Infrastructure Grant, here to Saipan. We can do that. The American, in partnership with CPA, through whatever grant writers that we do. The reason we can do that is because MARAD, or the people in MARAD who are in that office, who I happen to know, because one of them I went to school with, or taught when I was teaching at Maine Maritime Academy, is now in that particular role. They know who I am, and they're interested in the CNMI. And there's always interest in the Western Pacific Islanders as far as being able to provide grant money. And the prerequisite for any IIJP grant is that you promote the trade of the port. And in this particular case, our concept, and CPA is kind of, seems to have some enthusiasm about this, is to provide at that same facility. And you saw the graphic in the beginning. I think it was the second slide of the presentation, a place where smaller vessels can trade. Right, that does not exist here. If you want to trade here, you're either on a big ship and you trade at the port, or you own your own or you lease your very own little piece of berth there at one of the seaplane ramps, and you can trade there. For everybody else, it's completely excluded. So there is no place for somebody who is independent, who has a vessel that wants to load and discharge and bring cargo, let's say, down to Rhoda and Tinian. Okay. So all of these properties, with the exception of the Outer Cove option, are all CPA properties. Outer Cove is interesting because there's already a $5 million grant that is in play. I don't know where it's been issued, what the status of issuance is. I think it's out of the same ARPA funds that we have been told that we'll be getting some stipend. But that's for the redevelopment of the infrastructure around the Outer Cove, to bring that whole area back to life. It happens to be that there's a lot of territory which would fit the training facilities that we're looking for on that property. It just becomes a little bit more difficult because it's all new construction instead of Echo Dock, for example, which would be reconstituting old buildings and existing structure. All right, next slide. Right. So this is a really important slide to me because for a training academy to really be able to give everything possible that it can to its students must have a training vessel, right? This right here is just an idea. I have done quite a bit of research on what kind of vessel could be converted to make for a great training vessel. And this right here is actually built, or a vessel like this is just an example, built to be a high-speed passenger vessel for the oil field. It's about 100 feet long, and if reconstituted, we'd be able to put about 50 berths on it. 50 berths is more than enough for crew and students and whatever additional people there might be. But if a concept like this could be developed as a multi-purpose craft, which could not only be a training vessel, which means for CNMI, it means doing uh, trips down to all of the other islands, Chuuk and Ponape and so on, the whole circuit, which would there's a lot of outreach in that idea, right? But it also could do ecotourism. You could put a modular towing package on it. There's plenty of horsepower to do towing, which means that you can also train people with what's called the TOAR, which is the towing license. Yep, thank you. And it could also be done as a research vessel. And NOAA, if you guys are ever in touch with NOAA, are constantly looking and can never find a suitable vessel for their research, right? That's a fact, Jack. Those are just the facts. And this would be a solution for that. So not only would this vessel double up as a training vessel, but it could also be a revenue center for additional things. How many people would like to be able to go up to, say, for example, the Northern Islands and not get onto something that just doesn't have any berths whatsoever, or it's very, very cramped? So there's a tourism, ecotourism, doing stuff with NOAA, research, core sampling, towing package. There's enough on the back deck where you could put 6 containers on there if you wanted to supplement cargo down to wherever, the other islands or up north or whatever. So something like this would be ideal. This is also shallow draft, which means that it would fit, because it's a catamaran, it would fit right there on the EcoDock property. And if this is about 100 or 120 feet long, there's plenty of territory on EcoDock. And I would like to do, if you don't mind, put me to slide number 2, so that for the new folks who legislators who are here, we can see what our concept of EcoDock is right here. Right. So if we look at that, we have the small port with all the way in the bottom with the crane there that would support small independent cargo vessels to do cargo that either don't have the means, or there's not the territory enough for them to be able to get their own berths on the North and South Seaplane route. There's enough territory for the training vessel. You have the schoolhouse. You have a big restaurant slant, yacht club slant, something open to the public, kind of a thing. So that draws from the idea of one of the priorities for CPA, which was that there has to be some way to open it up to the public for that kind of thing. And then you have the firefighting facility on that reclaimed land. You've got the lifeboat trainer and the rescue boat trainer. Something like this, right, is what would make our maritime academy into something super, super great. Okay, back to the original slide, or back to where we were before. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here's our ask. Our ask is some kind of a partnership with you all, and this can come in all sorts of different flavors. Starting out with something very simple, and that is to help promote our success. Right? Be active verbally and on paper, so that everybody knows about the Maritime Academy. Everybody knows that Saipan wants to be the center of maritime training excellence in the region, so that kind of just softball support would be greatly appreciated. Specifically, we'd like to ask you for a letter of support to CPA so that we can in fact get EchoDoc. Again, I think the big barrier there is we're not going to be able to bring in, the $70,000 a year that they want, which they'll never get anyway on that property, meaning CPA. But something like that to help push the ball over the goal line for us to be able to get EchoDoc. Advice, assistance, perhaps even funding for the high ticket items. Some of that we'll be able to, our training stuff we'll be able to do with the ARPA funding that we've been promised by the administration. We're really looking forward to that because we want to start buying our life jackets and our firefighting suits and our line and all of the stuff that we need to be able to teach the courses that are on the table. Will we be able to succeed without this other stuff? Yes, we will, right? But will we be able to be great and have state-of-the-art program without simulators and without a lifeboat and without a rescue boat dedicated to conduct training on? No. Do we have off-ramps for some of this other stuff? Yeah, we have a relationship with Military Sea Lift Command where we can do the lifeboat training on these ships out at anchorage. We have DPS that we can work with that have fast rescue boats. So we have outlets, but we would like to see that. These other things are really not that expensive, right? We can get all of this equipment, from salvage yards or scrap yards in China and get them out here for quite a reasonable cost. But then we have to have a place to put them, which gets us back to EchoDoc or one of the other CPA facilities, or the CPA waterfront facilities. Assistance and funding with the MRPL, with advice, assistance, funding with a multi-purpose training vessel. If you look at the model in the States with the maritime academies, all of the maritime academies are or exist in partnership with the U.S. government, with MARAD. The training ships that they have are given to them, and the funding is given to them by the federal government. So we think that a vessel like this can be brought here, fully converted for about $3 million. We think that that it can operate at a sum zero cost, meaning that once we develop its program and do ecotourism and do all of the things that can produce revenue, that it'll be self-sustaining. But we don't have $3 million in the back pocket to pull out, and this could be something that again CNMI can showcase as part of this Maritime Academy. Advice assistance for tuition assistance. We don't have all the answers. I can tell you that through the Naval Sea Cadets, they have already agreed that they would fund for those kids who are in high school in the maritime program. If we run those all the courses as ATs, advanced trainings, that they will fund portions of them like they do with all the other ATs. PSS can pick up a piece of it. Parents can pick up a very small piece of it. And we have the ETP, which is the Eligible Training Provider Substance Package. It is going to go to whatever ETP, whatever that office is in a couple of weeks. We've got some things that we need to add to it, and that's it. Last slide. Seafaring is noble work. It is. Captain Dave and I, we spent a lifetime, really the last 40 years, going to sea. It's been very rewarding. I'm in a very good place financially as a result. I wouldn't say that I'm rich, but I'm taken care of, you could say. I will tell you just a very quick story, and that is that I was sailing as chief mate on a ship during the early parts of OIF, Operation Rocky Freedom, on a ship just like this, operated by one of the companies that is out here. And I had a young seaman, not a young seaman, but a seaman who was entry level. He was in his mid-30s. Obviously, he had something going on upstairs, right? You can tell when you're talking to somebody.
Push the button. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So so this seaman came on board, and I got to know him a little bit, and And he said, "Oh yeah, he was in San Diego, sitting up in one of the towers overlooking the port as a bean counter for some company doing just mindless work, hating his life every time that he drove in and drove into the office and back home to his family. And from his vantage point of his office on the whatever floor of this building, he was looking at these ships coming in and out of harbor, thinking to himself, oh, who is it that's on those ships? How do we, what do they do? Where do they come from? How do they get there? And so he did some research, and he went and got his entry level license. The next thing you know, he's on the ship with me. And we had many, many long conversations. But one of the takeaways was that I was able to tell him, no matter what, being a mariner, being a seafarer is a noble job. You are part of the international commerce machine, moving everything that you own from one place to another. If it's the gasoline that's in your car, or the clothes on your back, or the food on your table, that all came to you here on Saipan, or at least 99% of it, by a ship. Seafaring is noble work. Okay, so I'll take questions now.
All right, thank you. If you'd like to maybe come around or if you got microphone batteries, we're good. All right, yes, excellent presentation, and we will now begin questions. Any questions, colleagues? I'll start, or okay, go ahead. I recognize Representative Yang Tamai.
I don't know if you mentioned it, but um, is this only for youngsters, teenagers? Can it be like for adults also?
Absolutely. Can we go to slide number, I think, 3? Oh, right there. We just passed it. Down, 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 down. Right there. Okay, 5 programs. So the first is a vocational track in PSS. The second is a educational track within NMC, which is the partial answer to your question. And then if you wanted to just take courses directly, then you could do so through when we establish courses either through the CMTC or through NM Tech. So the answer to you is absolutely. One of the important pieces of it is, and I'll just mention this again, is that once we have all these courses, right, we can offer them to the public. And not only can we offer them to the public, but if the public does not have the resources to afford it themselves, meaning, Mike, Joe, or whoever, uh, they can, because we'll be registered with the ETP funding, they will be able to get educational subsistence through ETP, right?
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Tina Saban.
Uh, Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I was going back to one of your asks on the last slide about advice and assistance for tuition. And I was wondering if you had any conversations about with say CNMI Department of Labor, with the WIA program, the Workforce Investment Agency, or WIOA now, or like even the scholarship programs here about assisting students who may want to enroll in your courses.
Okay, so the first part of your question, the ETP package that I have spoken about a couple of times is with that program that you just mentioned, or the workforce assistance, or whatever that is. I don't have all of these things in my brain. My brain is full, so it doesn't work fully well. But that's what that is. Now, as far as other tuition assistance or scholarship programs, one of the most important partnerships that we have right now is with NM Tech. Okay, so let me just talk about that just very briefly, because they're the experts in the room, right? They're the adults in the room that understand about how all this works. NM Tech and Western Pacific Maritime Academy have entered into an agreement where we will be housed under their house or their roof. So in that agreement, They are providing us with a classroom, with administrative support, and with an office, with computers and all the rest of it, in exchange for the fact that they can now add maritime into their suite of vocational programs. Okay, it's actually a perfect marriage of programs so far as we're concerned. I would say that it's probably better for us than it is for them, but they are fulfilling certainly their mandate in that partnership, right? And that can be sustained long term. We would love to graduate from that, or in partnership continue that into our own facility, a dedicated maritime training facility. But even if that never happens, right, we have this really, really great relationship down there with NM Tech. And those are the people that, when we start looking at the 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 fidelity of the kind of question that you just asked, they're going to give us that advice. However, I would say that nobody has all of the answers, and so if there's creative ways that everybody at this table in this seating, ideas, brainstorming is a very, very important part of our process, right, Captain Dave? Yeah, we spent hours with beers in hand talking about, the what ifs and the maybes and the dreams of things to come. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rep. Saban. Any other questions? Rep. Lizama.
Thank you. There is another program, I think, on island. It's done by U.S. Coast Guard, that they train an individual, and wants to become a boat captain, as an example, they are able to go into the PX. Will any of these students, if they enroll, will be able to have that privilege?
Okay, so that is actually an excellent question and is on my list of things to do. One of the things that, in line with that, that we're doing is we're working with the headquarters people of the Army National Guard here to gain access to their facilities as an additional option for us to instruct that, and more specifically with the Sea Cadets. The reason is because they've got a great facility down there. They've got a classroom, which is really quite big, and that doesn't answer your question specifically, right? In terms of what Coast Guard can offer, they do not provide training themselves here on Saipan. What the Coast Guard does, and this is a big part of the process that we have to go through to get training, is to work with National Maritime NMC, National Maritime Center in West Virginia, to get our courses approved by them, by Coast Guard, as accredited accredited Coast Guard courses. That course, like, we can teach a seamanship course anytime, but if it's not accredited by Coast Guard, then it cannot become an endorsement on your Merchant Marine credential. So if we go back and remember, what's the first thing that we give the kids? The first thing we give the kids is that maritime Merchant Marine credential, because every piece of training after that becomes an endorsement into that credential. So local Coast Guard, they don't do training. They do work with maritime safety and that sort of stuff, but it's not organized training. But it is Coast Guard, you're absolutely right, that accredits the courses that we are offering through whatever programs we're teaching. Welcome.
All right. Thank you. I have just a few questions too.
Yes, ma'am.
I was curious, just because I know that we currently only have one harbor master in the Mariana, I think even for Guam, right? From what I heard. Would this program provide a pathway for harbor masters as well?
Okay,
or
so
is that
that's
more?
No, that's an amazingly good question. Why? Because this is a very personal question to both Captain Dave and I, because we both worked for Cabris. Unlike pilots associations all over the country, there is no pilots association here on the CNMI or in Guam. What it is a private company that has a monopoly on the pilotage. Okay, when you put together private company pilotage altogether in one word, you don't come up with a very good idea about it, right? one of the problems that Cabris is facing is that they don't have and this goes to your question, they don't have a backstop plan to replace their pilots, right? They have 4 pilots, not just one. Captain Salas in the port is one, but there's 3 others, and the other 3 work down in Guam. But they do rotate. So, for example, if there's a shortage, then and there's not a ship movement here in Saipan, then they'll take Captain Salas and they'll pull him down to Guam for a day or 2 or whatever and send him back up. It just happens to be that Captain Dave yesterday was called by Cabris because one of their pilots is on their tug in Japan and they need him back in Guam. And so they have asked Captain Dave to actually fly to Guam and bring the tug Tamara and their load of rebar. What did I say? Yeah, Japan. Back down to the CNMI or back down to Guam. So yes, there is a shortage. And a side note of that is that because of the perceived shortages of pilotage, right, that the Navy has asked through another company in Guam that I've done consulting work with to find pilots, right? Because the Navy wants to hire their own harbor, and there's a lot of precedence for that, right? So again, interesting to your question, in the past month, I've been working with GSY and I've been sourcing pilots through my own network. So pilots are not cheap animals. They're not. Pilots start at you can't get a pilot to turn his or her head for usually less than about $300,000 a year, and the economy does not support that here. So these pilots here, I'm going to guess, are probably a third of that, and so it's going to be really hard to entice a pilot from someplace else to leave a $600,000 a year job to make $100,000 on the lovely island of Guam or the CNMI.
Wow, thank you. I guess I just think of that as a career pathway that it would be awesome to have more of our youth to continue, or so my other question was, I did hear you say that Congress pays for the Sea Cadets.
So so the way it works is that Sea Cadets is funded in combination by congressional mandate. I can send you another slide that talks about whatever those laws are, but they're also funded by Coast Guard and they're also funded by the U.S. Navy. So I don't want to say that they're well funded. They're funded enough to have a skeleton crew and headquarters, and they're funded also enough to fund all of these advanced trainings. They call them ATs. So what that means is that if we here on Saipan want to run a sailing class through Saipan Sailing School, part of WPMA, or if we wanted to engage with a diver and teach diving, or if we wanted to engage with somebody that does rock climbing and teach rock climbing, rappelling, or if we wanted to do a advanced training as a maritime class, one of the classes that we offer, then 90% of that, between 50 and 90%, is paid for by Sea Cadets.
Awesome. I guess I was trying to get to your summer program that you're planning with the trainer. Like, they're going to pay for that person to come out here and where to stay and all of that.
Correct.
Wow.
So so that particular Micronesian Maritime Heritage program that has been put together, I would say, between Ray Tabuteb and Gordon Marciano and the master navigators and myself, that actually is going to cost probably about $2,500, maybe $3,000 per person. We try to keep it down to less than $100 per day, but the economics just don't work out. So it's going to be about $130 per person per day for a 7-day program. The cadets and their families are responsible for travel, and they're responsible for about 10% of the cost of the AT. So families will, put up $100 or $150 for the more expensive trainings. But if a kid wanted to learn, if a kid joined the Sea Cadets and they wanted to learn how to dive, then we could find a vendor to offer that training here. And there's no end of possibilities as to what to do. But this thing with the Micronesian Maritime Cultural Maritime Heritage Program is really, really exciting, because that's going to bring kids face to face with the master navigators. And I can tell you a personal story again. When I was in 7th grade, I read the story of Kon-Tiki, and never did I think that I would. Well, that boat is not actually from here or from Micronesia, but still in general from the Western Pacific. And never did I think that I'd be face to face with the master navigators, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for and honor, from the 7th grade to today. So,
Wow.
wanted to go back to your question about the pilots and progression. So there's absolutely a path of progression to pilotage. But because Cabris, owns the pilots and owns that whole process here, the fact that they have not themselves developed a backstop for their shortage, and one of their pilots is like 80 years old and blind in one ear and deaf and blind in one eye and deaf in the other ear, and has knees that don't work and whatever, but still pilots ships, right? Can't see his way into port, but still does the work, right? Captain Dave? Yeah, no, I'm saying that cheek and tongue, but to have somebody still doing pilotage at 80 years of age is really quite a remarkable thing.
I definitely think in any industry, it's important to be able to build up your workforce. And in that particular one, like you said, they haven't made that investment yet, but I think it's definitely time. I thank you so much for coming today and sharing this presentation. I've really heard so many collaborations among such a variety of entities and people, and I feel the cultural importance of this work to allow our kids and our adults who have that connection to the water like we do, to have this way be a pathway to earn a living and become self-sustaining is so important. And even if they could make $600,000 somewhere else, to be able to make $100,000 here is pretty awesome. And to have your family here and have your land here, I really feel like if people could know how to navigate that path, we would have more people lining up for it. I'd only heard a little bit about Captain Solis's story, and if we had more opportunity like he did, maybe we'd have more harbor masters here. But that's another story we can talk about.
Sure.
If there's any closing statement, I would like to let you do that now.
Okay, so Captain Salas is definitely a person that I look up to. He's one of the first friends that I made in the maritime community here. His son, John Salas Jr., I think is well poised to eventually, upgrade his license and become a pilot himself. He's a very good mariner, and I think Captain Dave and I have both sailed with him. So kudos and respect to both of those guys. I would say, in closing, that we're going to be, I think, successful on the merits of a good plan and providing training that will bring young people and adults alike into the maritime workforce, if they're working here on Saipan or working on the mainland and bringing the money home, or working on a ship. No matter what ship you're on, you're going to be someplace, right? So so there's, in part with your support and leadership and encouragement, we are where we are here today, and so that by itself is a success. What's going to make a success into a really, really great thing is going to be our partnership with the CNMI government in whatever capacity that might bring. And so my closing remark would be, consider what that might look like, right? Consider what resources could be added to things like a training vessel or some of the other facilities that we talked about. Consider even the small things like the soft asks, such as public support and promotion of the Maritime Academy. In closing, you guys are seafaring people. I'm here because I'm a seafarer, and it would be, really great to see folks from the CNMI all over the world as mariners on professional mariners on ships. So thank you.
Oh, I'm pushing the wrong button. Thank you to Captain Bucker. I really appreciate it. And also thank you to for coming here and being open to sharing your presentation to all of us. So have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Captain Johansson, too. All right, so I'll just close up. We are not having an official meeting, so I do not have to have an adjournment. To all online, thank you for joining us. I hope that you will also be interested in pursuing careers in the maritime industry. There are pathways now for you. There's information that you can check out definitely through NM Tech and PSS if you're a student and at the schools there. And if you're at Kagman High School, I hope you're joining this summer opportunity. And with that, I thank you all in the LB for accommodating us this afternoon, and have a great day.